This podcast contains discussions of domestic abuse and sexual violence, which some listeners may find distressing. Please take care whilst listening, and if you need support, you can find links to support organisations in the podcast description.
Hi Judy.
Hi Anna.
This is our second episode for our Safer Spaces Now podcast, and I am very grateful to you being here.
It's my pleasure.
And the reason being, well, because you're my bestie, but also because of the role you have in the festival industry and how long you've worked in it and how supportive you've been of our project and what we've managed to achieve working together. So I guess it will be really interesting to hear your background in festivals and then how we came to meet and then what we've done since. So you started well ages ago.
Well ages ago, yeah. Which kind of shows my age as well, but we'll move beyond that. So I guess my background festivals, I've been working in festivals for about 25 years now, so it's quite a long time. And I started sort of working with Oxfam on their stewarding and festival team, and basically sort of went in about 2003 and sort of picked up what was 3 festivals, and then was there for about 8 years and sort of built it up until it was about 25 festivals before I sort of left it. And that was a great sort of platform, I guess, for me to then go off and do other things, because I've met so many great people and so many sort of festivals, and had quite a lot, so much experience of on the ground dealing with the public, which was probably my biggest takeaway from there. And then sort of went freelance in the festival world, worked across a lot of festivals, did a lot of roles, did sort of gate management, campsite management, event control, worked in evictions, did again sort of a massive range of of operational jobs, I guess, and again sort of dealing a lot with the public and sort of staff and things. And then went on to take a substantive role at BoomTown in 2017, I guess, when I came in as the ops manager, and that sort of just progressed, and then I was there sort of until October this last year. And I think for one thing for me is sort of a passion for sort of safety, security, people's safety, people's experience, people coming. It's I think one of the most important things to me is that not just that people come alive, go home alive, and are safe, but actually the experience in between of what they have, because as for festivals, we're selling ourselves an experience, and we want people to come and have a great experience. And if people do have great experiences, it can really sort of impact their lives. They can go away sort of having met random people or seen a random act or a band or something, and it will just spark something in them that can literally change people's lives. But then on the flip side, a small or large, any size festival is a reflection of this sort of structure of society. As festivals, we build towns. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. We build a town, and then we have to put in all sort of the layers that you would expect within, the council and policing and, all sort of infrastructure and water and plumbing and electricity and toilets and all that kind of stuff. And
that was all mind-blowing to me when I started.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah, I kind of look at sort of the teams that I run as being the council, where I get to be the mayor.
Yeah.
Or but it really is a sort of, it is a mini microcosm of society. Yeah. And within society, sadly, and, having said, I worked managing security teams, I worked sort of directly with evictions. It's sadly, you also then get to see that sort of, 1%, probably no more than 1% of the people that are not having good experiences. And when they don't, it's wrong to think that is all that's going on at the festival, but it is often what we see as operations or what you hear about or what you're directly dealing with. And so from my point of view, I would see a lot of the experiences that people were having that were not positive experiences, where, bad things had happened to them, or they come a cropper with something unintentionally or unexpectedly, there are.
And also people come with their stuff That's the other thing.
They
isn't it?
bring their
Everybody
stuff,
has
they bring their
going on,
baggage,
and
they,
it's-
you know,
yeah.
it doesn't leave that behind just because they've stepped into a different reality, sort of sometimes. So, you know, a lot of what I would be seeing, and like just rounding back again, for me, it's like not just are people having a great time, but let's hope that they're not having a terrible time, because equally, you know, it can change somebody's life for the positive, but can also massively change somebody's life for the negative, you know. And for me, that sort of those crime elements, those experiences, you know, a lot of it was about how we could make the experience better for women, and, you know, and sort of more vulnerable people within the sort of our society. And so, you know, the sort of whole sexual harassment, sort of assault, rape, those kind of things was always an area that I was keen to see how we could improve.
Yeah.
You know?
And through that time of you working, obviously you've seen the shift from that societal perspective that we speak about, but also I wonder internally women taking on more leadership roles within the festival industry.
I mean, again, 25 years in the industry, you know, our industry was no different from probably most industries. In when I came into it, it was predominantly led by white middle-aged men, and there was an expectation that that's where experience lived, you know, and that women sort of coming in were junior roles or support roles, or, you know, well, I mean, I particularly experienced this doing Oxfam because it was a charity, and B, running volunteers, and C, sort of doing the soft facing things. You know, we weren't security, we were stewards. We were all about customer experience and communication, but also because the stewards are often the first people on the ground, they're also directly dealing with sort of that initial start to incidents or the initial reporting of incidents and things like that. But being a woman sort of coming in from a seen as a potentially softer, more feminine approach, you know, it's like being taken seriously, you know, being allowed to have knowledge, an opinion that was not an inaccurate opinion.
Yeah, and a totally different gaze. That's the thing as well, isn't it?
A very different approach, and then sort of cutting through the underlying sexism and being sort of heard, and sort of sitting in operational teams or control rooms and things like that. It's like, it's taken a good few years to sort of cut through and get to a position of actually feeling on a par.
Yeah, and I think as well, being a bit of a trailblazer in that space, I think, and that's what I hear a lot when people talk about Judy Beck. I'm like, this is my friend. Is that you've led the way, and there's a lot of now younger women coming into the industry that are able to do more senior roles and have more influence because you created space for that, which I think is something that I know makes you uncomfortable.
I'm 100% uncomfortable. I mean, I will take the humble approach inevitably because this is kind of me, and I'm not really a great self-promoter, but I would say some of it is the time that I came in against sort of what's changed since is that a lot more women feel like they can come into the industry and can come in at senior roles or grow into those senior roles and sort of do it with a sense of respect. I probably started a little bit earlier than that, and I would say I'm probably sort of in a small but strong cohort of women of that time who were absolutely sort of pushing those boundaries and pushing that ceiling, I guess, pushing the glass ceiling. And so I wouldn't like to say it was me,
not just,
but I would
part of it,
definitely say that I
did
did come in and I did grab that one between my teeth, I guess, and I was determined not to let it be a thing that would sort of stop me being heard and pushing my voice and being able to progress, and then bring other people along and work with some amazing women.
And I think as well, like, it is really, it's a key part of what I think gets overlooked when we do talk about safety and experience when shows, and this is again where we see festivals and the industry itself reflecting wider society and how we develop even structurally towns or workspaces or hierarchies or support is very much has been built in our society, our cultures, through the male gaze. And that experience is very different to a woman's experience. And actually, how do you make a festival safe for 50% of your audience,
or sometimes more than 50%,
and people of other genders as well?
Absolutely.
Anybody who is not a cisgendered straight white male. How do you make that space safe, truly safe, from a truly informed perspective, if you don't have the
don't include the people that are actually having the experience on the other side? 100%.
It's got to be co-produced,
and it's so interesting to see what a man will not pick up on as being a problem, because it's not a problem that they've ever directly experienced, and so therefore it doesn't exist as a problem.
I mean, we've heard that just talking about like the layout of toilets or lighting, and you know,
dark areas, woodlands,
and
you know,
lovely that we've
creating artistic sort of like structures that you kind of go, oh, that's creating opportunity that you wouldn't want.
Or like, you know, when I've spoken about, like, we call, you know, silent discos, we call the gropey grottos. And that, you know, there was a time where it was like everybody loved a silent disco, but they were always in like big tops. And we obviously, coming into this, the first thing we started to do was walk around sites and be like, that one's, I don't feel weird. And then as we met more people and yourself, you'd be like, I need to show you something. I want your opinion on this. So I'll be like, and I remember some of the guys we were working with, and again, great that they're open to it, because they're open enough to say, I've never thought about that. Like, that's not something I'd even consider, because I don't feel unsafe on a day-to-day basis. I walk around and I don't have a constant hypervigilance about my safety. And that's not something that you can just, it's not a thing you can just learn academically, because it's a lived experience, isn't it? And actually, we've seen that shift now, where women are now, I think as well, being more vocal about things and saying, actually, that's not, I mean,
nice. more women in those sort of those fundamental core positions. So the positions where you get to really influence what the outcome of the festival looks like, feels like. You know, there's sort of overlay to it, sort of having more women in sort of design roles, in site development roles, things like that. It's like, because inevitably, as a woman, and other women are going to talk to you, and they're going to talk to you more openly about their experiences than they're necessarily going to do to a man. So it's not necessarily that you're kind of, you know it all, or that you're being told it in direct sort of feedback or whatever, but it's just like by hearing the stories of, and even staff, like the stories of the experiences of staff, never mind the public. I was like, we need to make changes, and we need to do things about this.
I always say in my other work as well, if you design something to work for the most vulnerable people in our communities, which women, femme presenting people are in the context of what we're talking about in domestic abuse, sexual violence, things like that. Also people who identify under LGBTQI+, people in minoritized communities, disabled people. If it's designed from that perspective, it will work for
everybody else, but at least you're not leaving out the sort of people.
Where it's often designed from this majority perspective, and then the minoritized, it's like, an add-on, whereas we're trying to
difference, and then you're still not integrating. You know, it's like, we do this for everybody, but you need special attention. It's like, well, no,
just everything should work for these people. Like, and then
if you're creating vulnerability, you're creating vulnerability potentially for everybody. So, like, no, absolutely. And I think one thing that with festivals, and you know, we've possibly been a little bit scared of, and it was one thing that sort of I definitely took on and embraced, and felt that there was support from statutory authorities, from sort of like, you know, other people, was the whole, we don't talk about it. You know, it's like, if there's a rape on your site, it's like, how can we make sure that people don't know about this? You know, we need to, we need to protect the victim, but we also, you know, what if it makes us look bad? You know, and I think one thing that I was really keen on was the idea that we are not worse than the rest of society. We are just a representation of what's going on in broader society. And actually, if you acknowledge that this is going on all the time, sexual assault is going on everywhere within society, then actually by us saying, and it happens here and we're going to deal with it, is not a negative. And being able to push that as a sort of narrative of like, okay, so if we're going to tackle this, the number of reports are going to go up. But the number of reports going up is actually us saying we're open to hearing your story. We want you to tell us your story, and therefore, the outcome is a positive outcome, because then we can start to look at year 1, year 2, we really push for report more, tell us more, and then we can actually get a proper baseline of what we're working from, and then you can start to see whether you get success.
Yeah.
And you're making a difference. But,
It's like that's the representation across the board. When we talk about domestic sexual violence, we see things in the media, and it's really problematic where they'll say, "Oh, sexual violence has increased," and we're like, "No,
the reporting has increased."
So when we see crime figures, we want crime figures to go up,
yeah,
to be representative of what's actually happening, because then we know people feel safe to report, and if they feel safe to report, it's because they're getting the right outcome, which we don't do at the moment in terms of the criminal justice process. It's not fit for purpose. Everybody knows it. We're trying to improve it. There's a lot of work to do, but the first step is building trust and getting people feeling safe to say something, so that we understand the level of it. So it's almost, we want to see it shoot up and then plateau. You want to see it go up,
and then you want to see that it's coming down. Absolutely. And then you can see that actually you're taking initiatives that make a difference.
Yeah. So that leads us then how you came across us.
And then how I came across you guys. Yeah. So I think you may have touched on this slightly, but in the previous podcast. But I guess I have to thank COVID to a certain degree, which is really odd to say and very weird. But so I was working at BoomTown at the time, but we had to cancel our show 2021. But Boardmasters found a way to continue. And because the BoomTown Boardmasters weekend was the same weekend, they both operated on the same weekend, I would never have gone and would never have had the opportunity to go to Boardmasters. But at the time I was just like, well, actually I'm really curious to see, and they offered me a role in event control, and it was the only time I was going to be able to do it. So I took that role, and I sort of somebody who works with you and that I've worked with before for sort of quite a long time, Jo, she was like, oh, you have to meet Anna, and because I was sort of, show me your policies, show me your procedures, what do you do about sort of like these elements? She was like, oh, we brought in safe spaces, we've got Anna, she's great, she's amazing, you really need to meet her, here's all of her policies and stuff like that. And so I was sort of reading up on it, because it was obviously something that I'm interested in at the show that I was working on. I was like, I'll be interested to see how they deal with it. So I was kind of aware of the service that was on site, which was obviously the first time that like a festival had that service on site. So I was sort of really interested to see what you were going to do, or how you were, dealing with things down there, for a start. But then, as you said, there were a few challenges maybe with
not for me.
not for you, but like, with bringing in your service to a festival that had previously run a certain way, and that people were used to, and this was a change, and it was a sort of a change of approach, and it is a very significant change of approach. I mean, it's one obviously that I've entirely embraced, but other people sort of maybe it's a big shift.
And I had no festival background at
and
all.
You didn't know about
so it
festivals.
Was not even
so the whole thing was a bit new for you as to how you would where you integrated and sort of got started. So there was some incidents that came up. There was some sort of, I think, a few questions around sort of the outcomes or how you were pushing that through, and sort of, I and because of it, I was like, well, clearly this is a really positive service. What can I do in the sort of control room position to be able to sort of make sure that we integrate it more and find out what you need?
Yeah, I think
what do you need and what do you need?
Overwhelmed when the amount that was coming through, because they didn't anticipate that, and the police.
Yeah. And I was in the event control position. So it was like, for me, it was like, well, what can I do to make sure that you can get what you need and the support that you need? Because we're all going to need to learn and change with this, So yeah, I sort of was doing nights, but then came down to see you during the day when I wasn't working, sort of put my head around the door, and I was just like, oh, wow, this is great. And already like, so at that time, I'd already been engaged through the event safety shop to do a project on a very large festival in Saudi Arabia, who wanted to sort of really address the issue of sort of sexual harassment and general sort of harassment over there. Music festivals were still fairly new to them, sort of coming out of sort of change over in Saudi culturally. And so I'd been working with a colleague in America to look at what could we do if, like, if we were going to really sort of approach this in the way that they wanted it to, we were looking at what the model needed to look like. And, you know, where we were sort of working was, well, you know, it was audience communication with the audience in advance. So we were sort of doing education. We'd do a big campaign piece. We need to do sort of a big piece of work with the staff and the sort of organisers, the management, and then sort of look at how we were actually delivering it on the ground. And that was through, you know, a dedicated sort of team, sort of of sort of experienced festival managers, if you like, who were very, very single issue focused, to try and handle the perpetrators, but then also offering some kind of support to sort of, you know, the women, and predominantly there it was women, but some men as well, that were the sort of victims of sexual assault and sort of harassment generally. So we'd been looking at all of this stuff, and then like when I came and met you guys, and you were just like, oh, well, this is what we do, and it was like, oh wow, you're doing it already. This is great, and you need to be on my team.
We didn't tell me about it at the time,
but I didn't talk to you about it at the time because it was still sort of
October to go in November,
and then obviously when sort of we, you know, evolved it a bit more, and it was like, well, what we need is your expertise and experience, but also sort of, you know, your support to be able to support the support of the victim side of things. I said support 3 times in that one sentence, but anyway,
that's a lot of support.
A lot of supporting. And that was where it was just like, I should be perfect. I just need to get her over and get her involved in the team. And, you know, we could only do it in a fairly small way on that first year. So sort of bringing you over and getting your involvement was just like, although I appreciate it didn't give you much time.
Yeah, it was a quick turnaround in COVID, and I hadn't had my vaccinations.
And you hadn't had your vaccination.
But I got them. So that was fine.
With pressure. On the GP.
On the GP.
Love.
Yeah.
And you turned it around really, really quickly, and it was great. And so, you know, and I think then from a point of view of sort of, the UK festival scene needs this. How are we going to get it out there? We need to get it out there.
It was also the team you had put together there almost were like on a consultant level, so all experts in their fields with lots of history and connections across the festival sector, wasn't it, in the UK?
Well, I mean, from you coming into, you've never worked on a festival site before, you didn't know festivals, you didn't know people, you didn't have the network, so it was just like, then you came to Saudi, met a bunch of like, I mean, you know, honestly, I brought in a really strong team across sort of a lot of the different areas of the festival, and say, well, there you go, there's your network.
Yeah,
there you go.
Amazing.
Go.
And like, I remember as well how that project, I think for a lot of the guys on the team that you brought over was really impactful, because there was almost an assumption, which we see a lot, I think, when we talk from the Western perspective about other cultures, an assumption that the issue was because of the culture there. Yeah. And it was then, I think, when we did some training with them and talking to them, and I share my lived experience and the work that we do in the UK, and I was like, no, this is no different. Like, it's just slightly more overt.
I think that was the thing that was really interesting about working in Saudi, is just like, actually, it is more over there, but it then highlights further how, you know, misogyny, sexism, sort of all of that still so much exists in our culture and in the Western culture, but men have learnt to hide it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's
and that's the thing where people are like, oh, well, if we make it, you know, I often hear, well, you know, some people from different cultures don't know you're not allowed to do this. And I'm like, everybody knows you're not allowed to. We know we're not allowed to do it, but this still happens. So it's not about not knowing you shouldn't be doing it. It's about thinking you can get away with it.
I mean, when you think sort of Saudi's actually quite progressive, and so they have a law.
Well, they had the harassment law. We still don't have.
Time, and we don't have
sexual
embedded in
like on
law
the streets.
that says you can't do it.
No, it's now been brought into employment law, but it's not a criminal offence to sexually harass somebody on the street.
No. And it's a lot easier
to
handle.
Since 2013, I think 2012.
But it's easier to deal with something that's overt.
Yeah,
you know, it's like when it's when in our culture it's microaggressions, and it's sort of insidious but not there. It's like from the perspective of being on the receiving end of sexual harassment, it's like so much harder to pin it down and go, this is what you said, or this is why I'm offended,
and
or
you're
upset.
perceived as the problem, you're being sensitive, it's you're over the top, it's this, it's that,
and everybody denies it. Everybody denies it. You know, or don't see it. And I think that's the other thing is just like, it's so within society is normalized, that it's like people don't even recognize that their behaviors are not appropriate, or what they've said is not appropriate,
or even have an understanding of the impact as well. It's the impact that people miss, isn't it? They're like, well, if it's not physical, it's not harmful. You're like, it's systemic, like, discrimination constantly that impacts every part of your life, that we know feeds into so many vulnerabilities and, you know, long-term mental health, eating disorders, drug and alcohol, like self-medicating, more intense violence and abusive relationships. Like, it all feeds into everything. And again, if it's not overt, it's an easy way for the powers that be not to think they have to do something about it, because it's, oh, well, it's over there. And you don't have to address your own behaviours.
And back to having data.
Yeah.
You know, having back to the reporting, back to the sort of evidencing, that then you can start to actually go that there is, this is a problem.
Yeah. And that was like, then you were like, right, come to BoomTown.
And yeah, no, I really sort of, you know, I having sort of, again, working in BoomTown, I was kind of, and it being a passion of mine to try and address that particular issue, I was like, okay, great, this is, now I've got somebody that I can sort of, that we can bring in, but let's do it in a really small way. Let's test it out. Let's see what sort of, you know, I think we brought in 4 of you or something.
I think we started with 4, and then we got up to about 13,
and then
because you
shot up to 75.
You were like, I found some more money. Can you bring more people? Like, yeah, cool. Like, and so then we came to BoomTown while the team were at Bordy's on that, the hottest year of all time.
Oh yeah,
that was hardcore.
And then it's like bringing in, trialing out your service just to sort of see
that was purely
how
outreach,
much it would be used, and
reactive.
it was working with the welfare team and sort of being available to support any reports that came in, and that it just sparked, you know, the positive responses that we got back from the public, from the staff, like that sort of the ability to take action, the way that you worked with our on-site police force and how sort of supportive they were of sort of bringing you in, and how much they felt that it sort of mirrored and tailored the sort of the Vogue approach from the, you know, the policing sort of priorities
were brilliant. And I think that the relationship there was, they just got it, in the sense that they were really like, we're here to help when you tell us you need our help, and that's what you need in those circumstances, because you've got to build trust. And our objective is always to encourage people to report, but from an informed perspective, and understand that they can talk to the police now, but they don't have to do anything after that, and giving them all that information in the moment. And that works really well. And we see such an increased, like when we look at the work we do at shows versus community-based settings, I think at one point we were looking at 175% increased positive outcomes, and people remaining engaged with police because of how closely we were working together. So there was no delay. You're not waiting for somebody to come on shift. You're not going through a referral process.
You're
not
getting
retelling
the
a
appropriate
story.
People, the qualified sort of specialist officers that are there, that are available, that are not sort of, you know, on call in a localized area that takes several hours to come, you know,
and that we give the people time, and that's how we set it, you know, giving, like the way that you really brought into our model of being able to create those safe sleeping areas, and people, and that's one of the key things I think it shows, is that people, it's the resource if there is a serious incident or anything, even any kind of really complex safeguarding or domestic abuse, or, you know, it's time consuming, because you've got to get somebody, you know, you want somebody to feel safe. They need to stabilize. They need to understand what their options are, what they want to do. You've got to go through that. They need to be supported in the right way. Everything needs to be recorded in the right way. It could take them, sometimes it's bang, bang, yep, I want to talk to the police right now, which is where we're getting to more and more with BoomTown, because there's so much trust.
Yeah.
And other times it's like, oh, I'm not sure, and I'm you know, there's a lot to unpick. We get so many non-recent disclosures that people have never spoken about before.
And I think that was the sort of like one of the biggest things that we noticed coming out of BoomTown was, and that was a real point to celebrate, was the number of non-recent disclosures, and which, you know, is a more comfortable place to sit as a festival as well, that it's like, these aren't things that have happened on your site that you have failed to prevent, but what you've done is, you know, create the opportunity for people to feel comfortable and confident that there is a place to go where they can talk about this thing. And it was like, actually, if we are giving anything back to society, then creating that opportunity, and you know, I've seen it at other shows working as well, where sort of, people in sort of quite critical domestic abuse situations who, and certainly particularly after COVID, where people were sort of locked down together and they weren't seeing other members of their, their own networks or sort of friends or whatever. It's like being stuck in that situation and then coming out of COVID. It's like actually being on an event site or a festival site where you can literally just walk up to somebody and go, can you help me? Yeah. Or can I just talk to you? And it's like suddenly there was an interaction opportunity that had been missed for a while if it had ever been there in the first place.
And it was hugely destigmatized as well because of how comfortable and bold you were as a show without us being so overt about it. And like it was in the pre-cons, it was on posters.
Yeah, we talked about it. We put stickers on the back of toilets. We did sort of like really push the report thing we want to hear. And I think, that the critical thing where if you're asking people to tell you, you have to then have a service that allows for the follow-up.
Yeah.
It's like asking people to tell you that they're having a bad time, but then going, oh, thanks.
Yeah.
That was really useful data. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's
and even
like,
when it's well-intentioned response, if you're not, it is a specialism. And I think quite often domestic sexual violence is perceived as lots of nice ladies that are nice and give you a cup of tea, and actually it's a real specialism. Like it's such a complex,
legal knowledge,
sort of
experience,
the legislation, the criminal process, private, safeguarding, children involved, housing.
And I was going to say, so often so complex combination of issues as well. It's like rarely just one single thing that is not going well. It's like it spirals, and there's all the different services, all the different signposting that you need to do, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like you're holding these people for a defined period of time, and then it is within our duty of care to make sure that they're okay. And then they're going to go back into the world. So it's like it's also an opportunity. It's like, here's a service that you can talk to. And if we got it right, which I feel like with Safe Spaces, it was very much working through to getting it right, was about how well people felt supported. And I know, I've seen feedback that's come through to you of like, yes, it was a really awful experience, but actually the experience of how I was supported to deal with that bad experience that I had has made me leave feeling a little less bad about the experience that I had, and it's sort of that. That's what we can offer.
Serious incidents, including rape, where people have chosen to stay because they felt safe and they felt supported, and people that often as well. Let's face it, it's such a prevalent issue. It's a very shared collective experience of women and femme presenting people that it's very rarely the first occasion somebody has experienced some form of sexual violence, which includes sexual harassment, So somebody, it's either they've never spoken about it before or reported it, or they hadn't had a great response. So we often get like, do you know what? I never thought I would report this again. And I never thought I would report this at a festival because, who do you tell? Security or and you don't get the right response. And that's a big part of what we did in the training.
And the training around that is like, the training that was offered to one thing that we did sort of include within the sort of Safe Spaces package was to do training for front of house facing teams. So, not just the security and stewards, but also the bar team, like the cleaning team, like, anybody that was going to engage directly or potentially be on the receiving end of a report, to make sure that there was a better understanding, I know festivals sort of like, not so many years ago where, a member of the public could sort of walk up to a security guard in a live situation and go, this is happening, there's the perpetrator, and it'll be, what's festivals, isn't it, love? It's like, well, no, that's not how we want the approach to be. And your training is so sort of hard-hitting but compassionate, I guess, that it really sort of like brings out people's empathizing.
Everyone's so sort of eager to be part of it and help, aren't they? And I think as well, what we've really jumped on was having, and this is why festivals for me were really an attractive entity in terms of when I started thinking about this, not just from that prevention, education, awareness and accessible support in a safe environment, but was the consequence we can attach to those types of behaviours. If somebody doesn't want to report to the police, being a licensed venue and being able to say, you're gone. Zero tolerance, and that we take that approach. That shows that we, for everybody, staff, traders, public, everybody is under the same kind of requirement in terms of what the expectation of their behaviour is.
Well, what you've also got is people, you've got a captive audience, ultimately, particularly, I mean, you know, possibly less so with the day shows, but certainly sort of like a 5-day camping festival. People are with you for 5 days, you know, and it's like you can talk. It's a great opportunity to start to influence culture, you know, and to sort of start to show people and see them, and then they have that lived experience, and then again they've learned something and they can take it away back out into society, and it's like, you know, it gives you a great platform and opportunity.
And it's now as well in terms of like how from the running of the festival where we then started, because we did like that first year, we got such great feedback. People were really speaking about it. The comms were really positive. And then we started getting the people contacting us before the festival. I'm in left my partner. There's a domestic abuse. I've got a normalisation order. I worry they're going to be there. So then we have all the ticketing team and the accreditation team involved and all the artist teams, and we're all like, you know.
And what messaging are we putting out through the artists? And like, are we booking artists that are supporting the message? You know, and I mean, what I was going to say is like, historically, we would get a lot of post-show reports where people hadn't felt they could. I mean, what you're saying is like, who do you report to? Who, you know, will you get the right response if you talk to a security guard or, you know, a member of the bar team or whatever? And it's like, what we did see was a reduction in that, because by asking people to report and by giving them the right, you know, a better response, or, you know, by giving them a response afterwards, people felt more confident to report in the moment, which then means that you can take immediate action. That means you can actually sort of catch the perpetrators. You can escalate. You can get a much more sort of satisfactory, if we could call it satisfactory, sort of outcome to a bad experience that's happened to people.
Yeah, it was. I think that's really one of the really kind of big impacts that have come out, is that people contacting us beforehand and being able to. But even on site, is the impact of us being able to say to somebody, it's okay if you don't want to report to the police, because some people are absolutely like, no, I'm not doing it, and we get that, but we can still take an action. And we can still remove this person, and they won't ever come back to this festival. And that's a significant immediate consequence that also other people learn from. I mean, we had some cases with people coming through, and we were seeing chats on external chats where saying, oh, well, you know, if you do this at BoomTown, that's it, zero tolerance, you're gone. And then reaching out to us, you know, saying, I don't know if you know about this,
but this person has been flagged or whatever. It's just like, or somebody complaining that their ticket's been cancelled, and then other members in the chat group kind of going, well, what did you do?
Safer spaces went BoomTown. Did you do it?
Yeah. Did you actually do it?
All of a sudden they go quiet, and you're like, oh, there we go.
And suddenly the whole active bystandering sort of becomes more than just you're stood next to an incident, but actually sort of it's a community response, and the community is holding people to account, and that's what you need to spread it out to. I think the thing that has been like a really interesting journey is the adopting the zero tolerance, and that is something that, you know, you as a person and as an organization have held a very, very strong and clear line on it. It's like where you then see sort of people's understanding of their own behavior and people's understanding of acceptable and non-acceptable behavior, and also that there is power in saying, no, we can say you can't come. No, we can say you have to leave. You know, we do have a license. We do have like a whole bunch of things that state that we have to keep people safe, and that does allow us to be able to say, no, you know, yes, we do have the power to say you have to go, and also, we will enforce it, and it needs to be enforced across every level, and that it's not sort of dependent on, you know, what your status is or how senior you are, exactly that, or sort of, or what you did. You know, and that's sort of like, oh yeah, but that wasn't that bad, it's not really, that bad, was it? And when we're talking about sort of microaggressions, and when we're talking about things that are so hard to pinpoint, it's like, well, then you're going into the victim-led sort of response.
Operating from a place of belief, person-centered, which again, then we get the questions of, but what if then somebody makes it up, and we're like, okay, you need to go to the training. Here's the statistics on actually it's the highest issue that we face against people in offence type, but also I suppose like problematic behaviours that we don't address, you know. And the process of reporting is terrifying still, and it's still gendered, therefore it's still often women feeling like they're going to make a fuss, or if it's in a work situation it's going to reflect badly on me.
It's my manager, and
deeply embedded like belief systems. So people, you know, the making up thing, like, nah, like we don't have that. And, you know, other than the chicken man with the sailor, but he confessed to it because he thought it was part of the BoomTown game. And that's a whole other story. That was one of the wildest moments for me ever. Remember, we sat in control and went. Basically, we had a report through, didn't we, that there'd been, I think, flashing and inappropriate touching in one of the wooded areas. And they were described as a chicken and a sailor. And we were like, well, that's a great description. And the covert team were like, if we can't find them, we're not find a chicken and
a sailor, right?
And then we were like, well, there's quite a few chickens. But then the guy was approached. He then was like, oh, yeah, I did do that. And the whole thing went on, and I sat down with the evictions. I was like, we've had this report, and, you know, this is our zero tolerance approach. And he was like, well, yeah, I mean, that's bad, isn't it? You shouldn't do that. And I was like, no, you shouldn't do that. And he was like, well, yeah, I should probably say sorry. And I was like, well, yeah, but we are going to have to ask you to leave and make sure that he's safe. And we do all the safeguarding around evicting people anyway. The response team then took him to the train station, as is per the process. He was like, right, guys, you know, hi. And they were like, okay, well, we're going to drop you off, mate. And they're very friendly. The team, you know, that was GES, I think, then doing that. And, you know, it doesn't matter why someone's going out, they'll always do the safeguarding because they train with us as well. Dropped him at the station. And I think the supervisor was like, it's a bit weird, this one, because we saw loads of people in chicken out. So I said, no, I know. But he basically said, yeah, I did that. And was very compliant and very polite. And they dropped him at the station, and he was like, well, what do I do now? And they were like, well, you're going home now. You've been, you know, evicted from the show and your friends are aware. And he went, okay, like this. And then they came back, and then we heard from the friends who had spoken to him. And it turns out he thought they were coming back for him because it was part of the BoomTown game. And it was the BoomTown Bobbies and not a real issue. Yeah. And we were like, what? Like, what's happened?
It's the wrong chicken.
They went back. So I'm like, guys, you're going to have to go back and get him. This has gone weird. So they've gone back and got him, and he was still stood there, but looked slightly less certain that it was a game. They were like, "You all right?" He was like, "Yeah." They were like, "Do you want to come back with us? We've spoken to your friends because I think maybe there's been a misunderstanding." And then I sat down again, and I was like, "So because you said that you'd done this," he went, "I'm so sorry. I thought it was part of the game." I was like, "What game are we talking about?" Well, I thought I'd won the game. And we were like, what? And his mates were like, oh, we're so sorry, he wasn't even there. But he happened to be also dressed as a chicken next to a sailor and confessed to the issue, but thought it was the BoomTown Bobbies and it was all part of a game. And then we were sat in control like, I can't trust anything. I'm going to second guess every decision I ever make ever again. And then we were like, this is bizarre. And he was so apologetic as well, because he was like, I feel really bad because that really did happen to someone, and now we haven't got them. And I was like, we feel bad, just have fun, God. Like, and we were like, oh, I remember them with the comms team, actually, like, can you just try and not do that game? Like, I don't know what the game was, I'm not sure. And then,
but don't involve chickens and
not chickens, yeah. And then not long after that, we got the call through control. The pirates have invaded the and control, like, save us back. We were like, no. So pirates that's on them.
They'll just have to do their thing. Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, we've never had an issue. You know, it's because the incidents where we are able to pick people up are very particular incidents. And, you know, people are, as much as that you think they might kick off whatever, they know what they've done. Mm-hmm. They know what they've done, and you know, they're not making a fuss. And often they're very, very grateful that there hasn't been reported to the police at that point. And we make it very clear to them that it could be at any point, depending on what that person wants to do. But yeah, so I think we've got to that place now as well with all the different security teams and, you know, the stewards who are so passionate about what we do, and like we see them as like another 1,000 people extension of our
sharing
service.
Your message and sort of taking the
and
right
that they
approach,
see it now as much as, you know, security for a long time I think would focus on drug dealing or, you know, that kind of stuff, and now they do the training and they understand the long-term impact of harm attached to this type of stuff, and it's like, and they now prioritize it as much as everything else, and you really see, and we have seen, you know, our service now with you guys was like 100 odd people,
and then it gets back to the training and how the training engages people on a very personal level. Yeah, you know, because I think and it was a sort of a conundrum that I was trying, you know, before I met you, before I sort of went through your training, was just like, how do you make particularly men, unfortunately I have to say it, but how do you men security operatives actually really get it,
Mm-hmm.
rather than it being but it's just
it's an over there thing,
a faffy namby-pamby thing,
Yeah.
or it's like but it's, we're doing our job professionally, but it's like, no, actually you will take it more seriously. You can feel that empathy, and what your training does is to really sort of like pull into that with people. I know the difference that I saw afterwards of sort of like how engaged it was, how much people then cascade that down to other members of their team, they sort of how many people actually wanted to sign up to the training the year after, or come back again.
I'm like,
I was like, hang on,
4 times. I'm like, I know, but
they're so
nice.
good.
Because I think it's my objective with the training, because I do reference my personal experience, because I have been raped loads of times. I was in an abusive relationship for a really long time. I've been through the process of reporting. I've been through the forensic process. I've experienced all of those attributes.
From a very, very personal
I work
position.
on the other side. I've done the frontline work. I now work in strategic, so I know all the systems. But I always use my experience, because it brings, I feel in those instances, and I can speak so easily about it as well, that it allows people to humanize something that can feel
it's
quite
not
removed.
a third person experience. And that's the thing, and they can't naysay it. Nobody can naysay the fact that you did actually experience that, and
that happened.
And breaking those kind of stigmas and breaking the assumptions. I think the other thing that I was quite taken with when I first met you and sort of working in the control room when we were at Boardmasters was your sort of drive to destigmatize the language. And again, it's like it was a sort of area that everybody tiptoed around for being afraid of upsetting somebody, so you couldn't use the word rape, or you didn't use the word sexual assault, or there'd be all kinds of codes for it, or sort of you wouldn't say it on the radio, or somebody might get upset, or it's triggering, or whatever. And it was just like, and that was something that I really took on board, was it's like, you can't change something unless you give it its real name and its real term. And that, if people feel uncomfortable, then actually that's a good thing.
And operationally, what we always did as well was the support was available for everybody, and we'd always make sure everybody knew we were doing it.
And there were sort of points, and people did get triggered in different control. And it's like, there are different staff have different experiences as well that will sort of like come up and come to the table and things like that. And that support was always there, but it's like so important to actually say it what it is. And then everybody will kind of go, hang on, this is the thing. It's being reported more. People are talking about it more. It's not something that we're hiding under the carpet because it's just too awkward or too uncomfortable, or it's talking about things that are linked to sex, and we don't talk about those things. So therefore, we can't talk about it when it's really bad sex. And, for me, it's like, that was absolutely something that I took on board from sort of meeting you and sort of working with your team, and just kind of going, no, this is, if we want to change culture, this is something that has to start. And
putting it into the policies as well. So then it was this is what we're doing, and it's we're formalising it, and then putting it into like the due diligence of contracting. And, we've held that strand all the way through, which I think is, again, it's that operational level and strategic level working together and coming at it from both angles and delivering it. And I think
but it has to come down to strategy. It has to become something that is incorporated across the whole culture of an organization or of a show, and then it has to be backed up by the operational delivery. 100%. And whether you need sort of, I would argue you don't need specialized security teams, because you just need to train all of the security up so that they can deliver it. I mean, having your team as specialists, absolutely critical, because it's not something, and I think it's a mistake if people try and come into it as in an arena where, when you say, like you say, it's so complex.
Like, we do welfare, so we can also do this.
There you go. And it's like, no, and again, I think this is something that festivals are now starting to learn, that, there needs to be somebody who is competent and qualified to deliver on that.
And confident to challenge when you're dealing with statutory bodies as well.
And that
because that's always scary for people. But we've done a lot.
We have done a lot.
We've done so much, and then with it, our team has grown, and we've got our core crew, and you're involved more and more, and we're doing more and more shows. And I know you're in a new role, and new freelancey role, aren't you? Doing lots of different things. And I think, and that our team is becoming, I think our organisation is growing. This year's going to be really exciting for us. You're going to have to help me with spreadsheets, and lots more. And we're going to meet some of the team that have been there from the beginning, and some that have joined in the next episode, and their experiences of working with us and what they've learned, and people, you know, we've upskilled as well in our team with lots of people that are really passionate about it. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to talking to them, and I'm really grateful you came and spoke to me today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Always happy to sit and chat and have a cup of tea with Anna.
Thank you for listening. If you found any of the content distressing, please prioritise your well-being and seek support if needed. Links to support organisations can be found within the podcast description. Help is available and you are not alone.